In previous session, we discussed about the J2EE architecture, N-tier architecture and enterprise architecture. Now we will discuss about the container. What is container, how you can use or what is the working of container, and as a web container, how Tomcat works and how we can use in our J2EE programs to run the Solid and JSP programs using container. First of all, what is the container? So the component based and platform independent Java EE architecture makes application easy to write because business logic is organized in reusable components. It means that the the architecture is depend on the component that we divided the particular application in component base. So in this component based architecture, business logic, or we can say that the presentation logic and database logic is divided in that way that we can organize and reusable that component very easily. To reuse these components and to make application easy, we need container. So the Java EE server provides the basic services in the form of a container for every component type. It means that you need you need any component, then you have to use that particular container. So the container is nothing but one type of interface which is used to interaction the low level or platform specific functionality that supports the component. To run that application or to run that component and use that component, we need some basic low level specific functionality that is known as a container. So before execution of an application, a web or web enterprise bean or an application client component must be assembled into Java EE module and deployed into its container. So when we execute the particular application or any component, we first of all we need to deploy that application or that component into container. Suppose we do not deploy or add that component in a container, then that resource, or we can say that object is not fetched by that by the runtime environment, or when we execute that application we could not find that object of that application. So container provides communication platform between client and component. So it works as an interface, or we can say that it provides the resources, the main resources to run the application. Now we move on to the types of container. As we know that the container defines differentiate between the component, what is the functionality of the component that depends on the container types. So the functionality of the container is defined by the platform and is different for each component type. So depends on the functionality, there are different types of containers are available in J2EE architecture. Using the functionalities, we can differentiate like EJB container, web container, application client container, or applet container. EJB container is worked with EJB component, or we can say that enterprise Java bean component. Web container works with the web application. Application client container works as an application container or servlet container, or we can say that any resources that we need to run the application at the client side, that is need or that resources that is deployed in the application client container. And the last one is applet container. To run the applet application, we need applet container. So first one is EJB container. The EJB container is the interface between enterprise Java bean, which provide the business logic in Java EE application, and Java EE server. So the EJB container runs on the Java enterprise application server and manages the execution of applications enterprise Java bean. So all the enterprise Java bean object resides in the EJB container. When we execute that particular application which need the EJB component, the resources that is fetched from the EJB container. Second one is web container. The web container is the interface between web component and the web server. A web component can be a servlet or a JSP. As we all know that to run the web application in Java, we generally use Solid or JSP technology. So to run this application, there are two technologies are used, and to run these technologies or to execute that programs, we need the resources of Solid or JSP that is reside in the web container. The container manages the components lifecycle, dispatches requests to application components, and provide interfaces to context data such as information about the current request. So whenever the client sends the request of the web application, that request is sent to the web server that is known as web container, and web container analyze that request and generate the response of that particular request and send back to the client. Next one is application client container. Application client container is the interface between Java EE application client and the Java EE server. So it works between the application client and application server. Some process that we need to interact, that is done by the client and the server. The resources is provided by the application client container. And the last one is applet container. It manages and execution of the applets, and it consists of a browser and Java plugin running on the client together. So when we need to use the applet in any our application, the applet container is needed to run the particular applet programs which is provided by the applet container. Now we move on to the web container, or that is used by the web application. So first we have to know that what is web application or web app. So a web application or web app is unlike a standalone application run over the internet. For example, that web apps are like Google, Amazon, Facebook and Twitter are the most famous example of the web application that is run on the internet. Through the internet we can access this all the application via browser. So a web app is typically 3-tier or multi-tier client server database application which run over the internet, and it is illustrated like in the figure that we see next. Then it comprises these 5 components. First one is HTTP server, second one is HTTP client, third one is database, fourth one is client side program, and the fifth one is server side programs. So these 5 components are used to contain the main 3-tier architecture, or we can say that web application. Generally web application is built up on the 3-tier or multi-tier architecture, and these all 5 components are needed for that application. First one is HTTP server. Generally there are different types of servers are available to run the web application. For example, Apache HTTP server, Apache Tomcat server, Microsoft Internet Information Server, Google Web Server and other many more are available to run the web application. Second one is HTTP client, or we can say that web browser. For to run or to execute our web application, we need web browser. Through web browser we can send the request as a client to the server. So for that we can use any type of web browser like Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Firefox, Safari and other many more the available browser that can used as a HTTP client to send a request. Third one is database. So to handle the web application or to execute the web application, 2 most components are client and server. But the third most important thing is database, because to execute the request and to generate the response there is a data is must needed. So that is fetched from the database. So to store the data which is needed in web application, we can use any type of database that can be used as a MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL, Apache Derby, MSQL, SQLite, OpenOffice Base, Commercial Oracle, IBM, SAP, then Sybase. Any type of database you can use as a database server. Then next is client side programs and server side programs. To execute that particular client side application or server side application, there is some programming is needed. So to to develop these programs, we need some technologies. So to handle that client side programs, we can use HTML, JavaScript and other technologies which can be used as a client side programming. Same as at the server side, we can use Java Servlet, JSP, ASP, PHP, Perl, Python, JavaScript or many more other technologies that can be used as a server side programs. So these 5 components are must needed when you create any web application. Now we see the architecture of web application. Here is the architecture, or we can say that working of a web application. First of all, HTTP client, or we can say that browser is reside at the HTTP client side. Client side programs is reside at the browser side or at the client side. It requests the message or it requests for the data to HTTP server via HTTP network, or we can say that HTTP protocol. When the request is sent to the server through the internet, that request is sent to the server. So when the network is coming picture, the basic protocol we need is HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol, or we can use a TCP IP protocol. So based on the request or based on the network, we can use any type of protocol. Generally when the web application is when we execute the web application, generally we use HTTP protocol. So the client send the request through the HTTP or through the network, and the request is sent to the HTTP server. Then to fetch that request, there is some technologies are decided there that can be work as HTML pages or at the form type. Now to fetch this request and analyze that request, there are different technologies we use. For example, server to execute the server side program, we can use Servlet, JSP, PHP, ASP.NET or etc. So when the request is sent to the server, this request is analyzed by the Servlet server side programming languages, and it fetch the data from the database, and it merge up through all the data and responses generated by the server. Then server is sent the response sent back to the client via the internet, or we can say that HTTP protocol or TCP IP network. When the data is sent through the internet, there are 7 layers are there. That first one is physical layer, second one is data link layer, third one is network layer, transport layer, session layer, presentation layer and application layer. Through all the layer, the request or response is passed from the client to server and server to client side, and all the task that is done by the OSI layer, it is performed in the request and response of messages, or that request and response is generated through all the encryption processes and the decryption processes via client and server part. So this is the basic architecture, or we can say that working of the web application. Now next we move on to that Tomcat as a web container. There are different types of web containers are available, but when we use Servlet or JSP technologies, there is the best approach we can use as a web container is a Tomcat. So generally a web container is an application implemented on web servers to implement Java Servlet or JSP. Now container creates a completely independent environment for running Servlet and Java server pages to give dynamic content to website visitors. So when we see any web application, there is no static data, but always dynamic data is dynamic data, or we can say that dynamic content is available and analyzed or requested from the client and analyzed by the server. So the container provides that environment, or we can say that container provides that independent runtime environment for the Servlet and JSP pages to create that content, to create that dynamic content. So the main role of the web container is to provide the runtime environment for the Servlet and JSP technologies. Tomcat is also called as a servlet container. It is developed under the Jakarta project of Apache Software Foundation, and Tomcat is an open source and licensed under Apache Software license. So we can say that it is an open source because it is written in fully Java. So so it is OS independent. So this is the basic information of a Tomcat as a web container. Now this is the versions. There are different versions are available of the Tomcat. So Tomcat was originally written by James Duncan Davison, then working in Sun Microsystem in 1998, based on earlier Sun server called as a Java web server. It began version 3.0 after JWS 2.1, and it is replaced at JWS 2.1. So Sun subsequently made Tomcat open source and give it to Apache. So there are the different versions are available of Tomcat. First one is Tomcat 3.0, which is released in 1999, and reference implementation for Servlet 2.2 and JSP 1.1. Next version is Tomcat 4.1, which is released on September 2002, and it is for the Servlet 2.3 and JSP 1.2. Then after Tomcat 5.0 is released in December 2003 for Servlet 2.4 and JSP 2.0. Then Tomcat 6.0 is released in February 2007 for Servlet 2.5 and JSP 2.1. Then after Tomcat 7 is released for Servlet 3.0, JSP 2.2 and Expression Language EL 2.2. Then after Tomcat 8 is released in June 2014 for Servlet 3.1, JSP 2.3, Expression Language 3.0 and WebSocket 1.0. Tomcat 8.5 is also released in June 2016 to support the HTTP version 2, OpenSSL, TLS, virtual hosting and for JSPIC 1.1. Then after Tomcat 9 is released in January 2018 for Servlet 4.0, JSP 2.3, EL 3.0, WebSocket 1.0 and JSPIC 1.1. Then after Tomcat 10 is released. Now initially we can use Tomcat 9 or Tomcat 7, but for the best output we can use Tomcat 7. Now this is the working of a container or Tomcat 1 container or Servlet container. Servlet container is the program which can receive requests from web page and redirect those requests to a Servlet object. So when the data or request is sent from the browser, it is fetched from the web pages and redirect this request to the Servlet object. And the browser asks the HTTP server for a page, which is a Servlet container. The Servlet container delegates the request to a particular Servlet chosen between the Servlet it contains. The Servlet, which is a Java object, is in charge of generating the text of the web page delivered to the container, and the container returns the web page to the browser which made the request. So this is the basic task of Servlet container done when the request is received from the web browser. As we see in the figure that the static data store, or we can say that browser sent the request for the static data, while the web client sent the request through the HTTP request. So when the web client sent the request from the browser, that is fetched from the web server or the web container. So HTTP request is sent to the server, and then the server sent the request to the web container. That is the in the web container there is a servlet or JSP object is reside. This servlet and JSP object fetch the request and analyze that how the data is sent to the application server. So web server sent that request to the application server, and application server analyze this request and generate the output using application data store. Then after the response is generated through the application server, it is sent back to the web server, and that is sent to the web client using HTTP response. So this way the Servlet container is worked using Tomcat or any type of any web container. Now that the typical what is the use case is defined when the servlet container comes in picture. So a user via a web browser, or we can say that HTTP client, issues a URL request to an HTTP server to start a web app. So when the first you start your web application or run your web application, the URL is sent to the HTTP server using your browser. The HTTP server returns an HTML form that is known as client-side program, which is loaded and sent to the client's browser. When the request is sent to the browser, it fetches that which type of request is generated. So for that for that server sent one form that is reset for the client-side program, and the user fills up the query criteria inside the form and submit the button. Then after client-side program send the query parameter to a server-side program, and server-side program receives these query parameters and queries the database based on these parameters and returns the query result to the client-side program. So when the client submit the form, that form and the parameters that is contained by the form is sent to the server. The server accept these query parameters through the form and analyze that is stored in the database at the server side. It matches the data and response is generated. So the response is generated through the server is sent back to the client side. So client side program receives the query result and display on the browser. So this process is repeat when the next time of request is generated, and same process is generated by the server when the response have to create it. Then after, how you can install the Tomcat 9 or 7. First of all, you have to download the Tomcat using given this link, that is http://tomcat.apache.org. Then after, you can use any type of version. Generally, we can use Tomcat 9 or Tomcat 7, but there is the best output, we use Tomcat 7. You can download this Tomcat 9 or Tomcat 7. Then after, you can unzip that file. For that, after unzipping the file, you can install this Tomcat. So for the installing process, first page of the installation is displayed like that. You see that welcome to Apache Tomcat setup page is displayed. Then after, you just have to click next button. Then after step 2, there is the license agreement is displayed. In this, you have to just check that I agree. Then after this setup display is defined, that how many components you needed when the Tomcat is actually run, or when the Tomcat is worked as a server. So you just select the type of installation. Generally you use a full installation of the Tomcat. These are different components are there, that is the start menu items, documentation, manager, host manager, examples. This all the components are reside on the Tomcat directory. You just have to click next button. Then after step 4 is defined, that is the Tomcat configuration options are there. There are different ports are there. First one is server shutdown port, second one is HTTP connector port, third one is the connector port for HAP. Then after Windows service name, that when you run the Tomcat, what is the service name is defined. The name is Windows service name. Then when you want to create the shortcut of that Tomcat, then you can click your checkbox. Then after Tomcat administrator login or credential are there. You don't need to just define username or password. You just can use when using start and stop services. Then after roles are defined, that is the manager GUI as a static is defined. But there is some changes you can done in this configuration, that is HTTP connector port. If you work with Oracle at the same time, then the Tomcat is not properly worked, because the Oracle port is worked in 8080 port. So you can change in this HTTP connector port as any type of, like 7070, 8181, any type of port number you can set as a HTTP connector port for Tomcat. Then after, at step 5, you will choose the location where you want to install the Tomcat services. Then after, you just have to click on install button. So there is the JRE location is defined. For that, you just have to install the JRE. When you run the any Java application, you must needed the JDK and JRE for the Java application. Built in, this is the default. This path is set when the JRE is placed in your computer. So if not available, then you can set manually your location of the JRE in the system. At step 7, you just have to click on the Run Apache Tomcat and Show README click button. Then after, finish. If you prefer to start Apache Tomcat 9 after the install, leave the checkbox marked. If not, then you will want to uncheck the checkbox. So this is the just simple installation process of Tomcat. Then after, to make sure that the Tomcat service is running or not, you just check out. So for that, go to the Windows startup menu and type Tomcat. From the list of available, select Monitor Tomcat. Then find the Apache Tomcat 9 or 7 services which you installed. At the bottom of the screen, you see that there is the icon is displayed like a watch type. Then you just have to right click on this logo and start the service. Then after, make sure that your service start successfully, and you should see that the running status is changed. Then after, next to the service name. For that, now to start the services, you can set the environment variable for the Tomcat. When you apply or when you deploy the Tomcat, install the Tomcat server to run the application of Servlet in JSP, you first have to set the environment variable. To set up the environment variable for Tomcat, the following procedure you have to perform. So right click on your computer or my computer, and then after, in the start menu, choose the properties from the context menu. Select advanced system settings, and under the advanced tab you can define new variables. So in this select environment variable, under user variable, click on new. So you can see that new user variable pop-up menu is displayed. In this pop-up menu, there are two entities are there. First one is variable name and second one is variable value. In the variable name, you set the name as class path, and in variable value, you just have to paste the path. You just have to paste the location where your Tomcat lib folder is reside. So in generally, there is the Tomcat is reside in C drive. So in C drive, program files, Apache Software Foundation, Tomcat folder, and in the lib, this path you have to copy in your variable value. Then after, to run the JSP and Servlet programs, there are two jar files are needed. So for that, we just copy this jar file in our environment variable. So the complete path is look like C, program files, Apache Software Foundation, Tomcat, lib, servlet-api.jar. Then after, again, for that, we just copy the C program files, Apache Software Foundation, Tomcat, lib path, and after jsp-api.jar is jar file is we needed. So this is the basic installation or complete installation process of the Tomcat. to test that our Tomcat is worked on or not, we just need to verify that. To verify, open your browser and just write down localhost colon 8080. Then after, you can see this type of screen that suppose you can't see this type of screen, then some problems are available. Then some problems are available, or you have to face, and you have to just uninstall this all the thing and just needed the program reinstall. So this screen defines that your Tomcat is properly worked. Now we just see that how many Tomcat directories are, how many folders or how many subdirectories are there in Tomcat. So these are the different subdirectories. When you install the Tomcat, you see that different types of folders are available in your Tomcat folder. So first one is bin, second one is configuration, third one is web apps, lib, and logs and work. So bin contains the binaries and script. So the startup batch file, shutdown batch file, or Windows startup and shutdown for the Unix and Mac OS, these all the batch files or binaries file are reside in the bin folder. Then after configuration folder is that it contains the system wide configuration file such as server.xml file, web.xml file, context.xml file. So all the XML file are reside in, or configuration files are reside in configuration folder. Then next one is web apps. It contains the web apps to be deployed. So you can also place the var, or we can say that web app archive file for the deployment here. When you deploy an application, you just have to put your application in web apps folder in root. Then after lib folder, it contains all the jar file that is needed to run the application. So contains the Tomcat system wide library jar files accessible by all web apps. You could also place external jar files for the database like MySQL, JDBC driver, etc. So all the jar files are reside in the lib folder. Then after logs folder are there. It contains the Tomcat's log files, and you may need to check the error messages here. So all the log is stored in the log folder. And the last one is work. So Tomcat's working directory used by JSP or JSP to servlet conversion is reside in the work folder. So these are the basic different subdirectories when you install or when you working with the Tomcat. This all the directories, subdirectories are needed and useful when you apply or when you deploy any application or run any web application. So this is all the thing which is useful for when you work with the Tomcat.